Divas, welcome back. This week's special guest, you don't want to miss it. I'm here with Senate Minority Leader Jason Pizzo. We'll talk about the special session. We'll talk about a future special session, what might be in the works for immigration. We talk about prisons and condos, lots of stuff going on here. Also, stick around. You don't want to miss what he has to say about the 2026 elections. Will he or won't he?
The National Guard is invaluable during disasters that have an end date. They've participated and helped in invaluable assistance in a number of hurricanes that you and I can both name, but they didn't drag on for 2.5 years.
You're listening to Deeper Dive with Derek Ham, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Let's dive in.
Divas, welcome back to a deeper dive. I am so excited for today's special guest. I am here in his office, Senate Minority Leader Jason Pizzo. That's right, the one and only Jason Pizzo. We're in his office today. Thank you for taking the time to join me.
Happy to be here.
So we have a lot of territory to cover. It feels like the session has been going on, the special session. Then there wasn't, it's two special sessions in 2 days. A lot of, first time we've seen this intra-party Republican pushback by the Republican legislature to Governor Ron DeSantis. So let's talk about, I think our listeners are pretty sophisticated. Let's talk about what's coming up. We have a immigration bill that you all passed that never has been given to the governor yet. And I'm hearing there's talk, this will come out on Sunday. So this may already be public knowledge by the time the podcast is released. But I'm hearing that there's going to be a special session next week. What can you tell us about what the next steps are going to be?
Again, there's nothing officially that's been announced, but just the kind of dynamic that's going on here. Our regular session, as all your listeners are going to know, doesn't begin until March. On this particular issue, while there may be a lot of infighting or back and forth, as you characterize it, all of Republicans, have a sense of urgency in making this issue time sensitive about immigration, and a lot of Democrats too, actually. So something's going to happen before regular session would start. So now we're in the first week of February. So there's a large block of committee meetings that have been canceled for next Wednesday. I think a couple more will perhaps fall off as well, the afternoon one. So I would guess a Wednesday morning gavel in for another special session, a committee meeting that afternoon, Wednesday afternoon, and probably on the floor, sort of mimicking what we had last week. But the other sort of component that you spoke of, which is important, is the legislature has not yet delivered and given the bill to the governor that was passed last week to sign or to veto. I think middle of last week, everyone was anticipating that as soon as he gets it, he'll hold a press conference and it'll be rather raucous and cheering and about how he's vetoing it, and everyone will get excited about it. But now that I think cooler heads have prevailed, I think all parties are working together. You've heard the governor indicate in the last couple of press conferences that he's had where, he's using metaphors about landing the plane and that last week was an aberration. And so I think there'll be an unceremonious veto, that bill goes into the ether or it's done without any fanfare or mention, or just mentioned in passing as he announces that all parties have sort of gotten together to work it out. And he can excuse it by saying, listen, there's a lot of testosterone in the room, and we're all super energetic and excited to deliver on the mandate of President Trump and the American people. And, we were just all just really enthusiastic. And sometimes, it's healthy in a democracy. I mean, this stuff writes itself about how they walk all the tension back from last week.
Right. And then, nobody is poking their finger. I mean, there's been a lot of open hostility in a very a break from the past 6 years. The governor's been given everything he's asked for from the legislature, and more, really. And, we haven't seen, I've been doing this for a long time, I haven't seen in the past 20 years, really, since Charlie Crist even, a public break between the Republican governor and the Republican legislature with this degree of animosity. Now, granted, the online armies, the social media armies were not working in overdrive back then like they are now. So I guess it's all like, what, just kidding, you know what I mean? Like all that about you're a liar, no, you're a liar, you know what I mean?
Well, this was a triggering event, I think, from the legislative side. So instead of a healthy, even witty repartee back and forth or some give and take over the last 6+ years since DeSantis has been in office, instead of there being sort of a healthy dialogue, some parity between legislature and the executive branch, instead of having that kind of, that healthy kind of checks and balances between the two entities, really between the two branches, it's been a unilateral directive that the executive has steered our legislation, our mission, and what the message is, and what the ethos really is of Florida, piggyback and attendant to his ambitions, obviously, to run nationally. And so this was a triggering event, and it's kind of like a situation where somebody you're in a relationship with, either by blood or voluntarily, looks like they've been harboring a lot of animosity and angst and frustration inside, and they just burst. And it could be anything that triggered it. All of a sudden, you're having a disagreement about something rather innocuous, and it just explodes with this rage that's been pent up. So instead of the old adage of "don't ever go to bed angry," right? Don't ever go to bed angry. And actually, while we're here in my office, Dara, I have up on the screen because we like to stay informed in real time, and I'm seeing a press conference right now we're watching with Governor DeSantis, and to his left with a smile on his face.
A very big smile on his face.
A bit of adoration is Ag Commissioner Wilton Simpson right now.
Yeah.
But again...
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you by pointing. I just thought it was interesting as you were saying that.
So it boils down to this. Instead of, again, there just being a healthy interplay and exchange between two separate but co-equal parts of government, there was basically sort of, I think it got to the point of involuntary servitude by the legislature to the executive's demands over the last 6 years. And this was just a triggering event. It should be characterized as, just a normal sort of non-unique demonstration of the autonomy of the legislature. Instead, it was like, for the very first time, they have assumed their identity. It didn't have to be so coarse and so abruptive. And unfortunately, instead of these discussions and negotiations going on, calling each other in before calling each other out, the problem is that once, that fuse is lit, you have all the social media, folks out there that just that start pouncing.
Right, and even after the governor adopted a more conciliatory tone in his remarks this week, his online folks, his online supporters, they kept up. There still was a lot of flame throwing, I guess is what I would say.
Yeah, and it's, I'm sure we'll do maybe a post-mortem on this over the next couple weeks after this presumably sort of works itself out between the legislature and the executive, both houses really, and the executive. But it's interesting to ask or to look at what was done spontaneously by supporters of both sides. Or what was done at the directive of these camps, so to speak, because
the proxy wars. Then,
yeah, and I'll give you a perfect example. It was sort of coined in this, characterized in this battle between the DeSantis bill, singular, and the other bill that was passed. Well, the DeSantis bill, quote unquote, There were 11 bills filed for the anticipatory, first session we gavelled in and gavelled out of by 3 senators, Senators Martin and Goley and Collins. 11 bills. So there wasn't a DeSantis bill. But that train sort of left the station, and it was like, the DeSantis bill. Which one? And then, not to mention that the content of many of those bills continued to do nothing either. So, again, we have to sort of balance and appreciate. I'll never stop trying to just be completely candid and comprehensive. I just don't know what the realistic and practical attention span or open-mindedness, I should say, of people to listen to rational thought, especially on the Twitters.
We'll be right back with Senate Minority Leader Jason Pizzo. And now, the news in haikus. Immigration standoff? Special session Cold War cools. The plane will soon land. That's the news in haikus. Don't forget, we'd love to hear your haiku. You can slide them into my DMs, or you can send them to podcasts, that's podcasts with an S, at e.newsserviceflorida.com. Wherever you're listening, please don't forget to subscribe and give us a rating if you like what we're doing. And we're back with Senate Democratic Leader Jason Pizzo. I was asking about what we think might be some of the elements in the legislation that they're going to take up next week, where they're expected to take, that you all are expected to take up next week. My guess is that Wilton Simpson, as the state's chief immigration officer, is a no-go.
Yeah, I would think so. You and I just observed, and your listeners, I'm sure, maybe were watching this in real time. The press conference, really just an appearance that the governor made at the Florida State Fair. Agriculture Commissioner Simpson was seated to his lower left, and then we watched, a lot of greatest hits, as you might call them, that the governor was talking about, and then kind of swiftly left the podium without saying goodbye to anyone in particular.
Yeah, he didn't acknowledge Wilton Simpson before he left. It was a little, just watching it seemed a little awkward, but we don't know. I mean, we weren't there, so he was very adamant that the chief immigration officer would not be taken. That his authority would not be.
Dara, he was adamant that the agriculture commissioner in charge of immigration is akin to the fox in the hen house.
That's true.
A couple times in both in different media. And that it seems to be there's a per se conflict of interest for the commissioner of agriculture, to be overseeing, especially when a large concentration of suspected illegal aliens or unauthorized aliens are working in the ag space. He wasn't shy about that at all. But today they made a joint appearance. Commissioner Simpson introduced him, rather effusive praise, and we'll see what happens. But the business of the legislature and what's at hand, special session proclamation was made by the governor on January 13th for us to convene. Article 3, Section 3 of the Constitution, we are required to convene. We may, it says, consider the contents of that call that were in there. There were 5 components. There was, assistance for agriculture after hurricane relief. There was in-state tuition. There were condos. Immigration, of course, and election integrity as it relates to some recent ballot initiatives that I know are rather discomforting for some people. So, those 5 things were announced. It's within the purview of the legislature to hear all of those and legislate on all of those, or to include anything really inside of that call. We gavelled in, we gavelled out, not before going ahead and overriding a couple of vetoes. One of which was a veto that had a much greater effect on legislative services and our ability really to operate here, either by accident or by design, but it was remedied. Kind of slipped in, hey, while we're at it, can we override the veto and $32 million worth of arts funding? And then we gavelled in for a B session. That was the A. And then we initiated our own B session, whereupon a bill was dropped on our desks, literally in hard copy, that none of us had seen, with an announcement for a committee meeting in appropriations that I sit on for that afternoon from 2 to 4. It was slated. And then there was a delete all, which means basically take the bill that you have and replace it with what we're proposing the following day. We thought we'd be back on the floor earlier on Tuesday, and we didn't get on the floor until about 3:45. Again, really no sort of lead time, so we used our best guesses as to what the content would be. But prior to that, Sunday evening, what we'll call the governor's bills, plural, were dropped for that A session, because when the window opens online, you can go ahead and any one of us could have filed a bill. Any member of the legislature could have filed a bill. 11 bills are filed by Senators Ngolia, Martin, and Collins collectively that were sort of piecemeal, sort of a la carte, separate bills dealing with these issues, again, separately, as opposed to one sort of one bill in the aggregate.
Bill. Yeah. Right. Let's talk about the Democrats' role here now. We had a little fracture in the Senate. You had the senators who were, so there's so many layers to this discussion, right? Because there's 2026 ambitions, there's 2024 endorsements. President Trump is kind of like looming large over everything, or at least fealty to President Trump is being espoused, whether that's actually the impetus for a lot of what's going on. There's, far be it from me to try to analyze what's in people's hearts and minds, but Trump looming large, 2026 elections, endorsements, everybody seems to be clamoring for an endorsement from President Trump. The Republicans in the Senate who were Ron DeSantis supporters in his failed bid for president last year came out very strongly in support of his legislation. That's all just sort of setting the table for you to riff on. Is there a split in the Republican caucus, or do you think they're going to, in lickety split make up? And where does that leave the Democrats? You're in a super minority. Does this empower you as a caucus?
Yeah, and to your several points, trying to summarize what's gone on. I think I was told by some of my Republican colleagues, it was a nice compliment from a number of them. It took me about 17 and a half minutes to do a historical timeline, the chronology of how we got here and the grudges from 2018 when DeSantis was in a primary against Putnam and then got the Trump endorsement all the way through until, where we were last week and how we got here and who's angry at who. It's incredibly nuanced, incredibly sort of Machiavellian at the same time. So, but really, the people need to sort of understand. I think to some extent, I think as we should act or should be is sort of in a vacuum, which means you can go ahead and express your personal opinion, but so few, Dara, of the motivation or the characterization or the color that and commentary that goes on pieces of legislation that are written down on paper are completely imbued with the ambitions, the wishes, the whims, the narcissism, the chess playing, the whack-a-mole, the
retaliation
of ambitious but frail human beings here. Mm. It's not just policy from a real academic sense of somebody who has no political ambition or no revenge, no grudge. It's not free of it. And for many of us who have been here for a few years, it just, you don't have to have the beautiful mind. It's just all over the paper. It's like we have our own little black light to the fingerprints that are on this and to the emotions that are on this. And so it's, I took it back to today's press conference, kind of reminded me of June 2nd, 2022.
Right.
The governor's sitting there, beating his chest about how much he's cutting from the budget. And most of those member projects were Wilton's. And today, Wilton's sitting there with a, adoring smile on his face and clapping along as he should, as everybody else does on cue. And here we are, fast forward. Illegal immigration is still a incredibly important topic. It is across the aisle. My caucus is overwhelmingly in support of having real, tough positions against criminal illegal aliens. Absolutely. It's Thursday afternoon right now, and my bill and my proposal on a number of these issues should be ready by the end of the day and released tomorrow.
And can you give us a highlight of what is in your bill?
It's pretty easy to identify that during questions both in the committee that we had and then the debate that I laid out that identified weaknesses, problems, bureaucracy, bloat, basically from a spending standpoint, as well as some ineffective and ineffectual policy kind of positions that were in the bill that actually passed that I didn't vote for. But to counter that, the 11 bills proposed by Senators Ngolia, Collins, and Martin also had gaping holes. It just continued to message without meat. So I'll give you an example.
Yes.
You take Senator Ngolia's SB 10A, because I've seen Senator Ngolia, and whether it's on Twitter or on the news, and keep saying, in addition to his 2023 bill 1718, which was the toughest or most aggressive piece of legislation, in America that a state would pass against illegal immigration, and then continue the narrative of the bills he proposed are so tough on illegal immigration, and it's crap. I'll tell you why. His SB 10A called for $1.7 million for 10 additional full-time positions to go to the Department of Commerce to go ahead and administer and enforce two different programs. The first being the E-Verify program under 448, and the foreign national land purchase under 692, 203, and 204. Well, taking a look at that, we're going to hire 10 more people and $1.7 million to go and administer and enforce. Let's take E-Verify, basically employment verification that someone has the right to be here and they're lawfully present to be able to work. Florida only requires E-Verify to be used when you have 25 or more employees.
Right.
If you go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, 87% of all companies operating in Florida have 20 or fewer employees.
So the majority of employers in Florida aren't required to use the program.
Overwhelming majority, north of 90%.
That's saying the quiet part out loud here, Senator.
Well, here's why it's both sort of disingenuous and inaccurate. It's disingenuous because when you say, we are the toughest, well, Georgia requires E-Verify for 10 or more employees. Alabama and Mississippi, even tougher, even a lower note. Arizona is like employee one. You have to, and even identifies and closes gaps and loopholes on independent contractors in 1099. It just doesn't have to be a W-2 employee. It's everybody. And so you can't say here. Look at our E-Verify that we're also pumping more money into. We're the toughest on illegal immigration and illegal employment when your neighboring states are objectively tougher.
Would the bills so would your proposal require E-Verify for all sides?
Everybody.
For everybody.
If we're all on board with this, if everybody's talking tough about it, if everybody's on social media and at the polls talking tough, Dara, then everybody. Let me ask it this way, sort of rhetorically, but in a sort of a counter position, right? Which companies shouldn't be required to only hire people that are lawfully present in the United States? So
how do you pick and choose? Who gets to be the decider of that?
Yes. Who are we accepting from all of this? If you guys want to be tough, then it doesn't matter if a company has 250 or 2 employees. Are we really saying that we want to go ahead and do a special carve-out for smaller companies to allow them to have illegal immigrants working in their companies? I don't.
So are you doing that because you really, would you have this in your bill because you really think that everybody should be doing the E-Verify verification? Or are you doing it to make a point?
No, I'm doing it because if you're going to...
Sure.
No, I'm doing it. I'm doing it for the actual program. I'm doing it for the actual system because
to equalize.
We have to be ecumenical. We have to be uniform wherever possible because
So you're not doing it to be a smart ass.
No. Everybody. I'm smart, and sometimes I'm an ass. Okay, so
I'm not calling calling you a smart ass.
No, I think
You are smart.
My worst detractors cannot say that I have not always been very honest, that I may open my mouth a lot, but it's informed when I'm engaging in something. And the biggest problem is, and I share this, I guess, with my Republican colleagues on some of the IRS code. Whenever you start creating exceptions or requirements, all you're doing is concentrating a larger pool of people to run to some other loophole, or make it as uniform as possible. So, if it's 25 or more, you create an incentive for workarounds for smaller companies. You start opening 5 LLCs with 23 employees instead of having one with 100 under one umbrella. So you're not subject to these things. Also, the penalties that we have in place right now, you're incentivized not to use E-Verify as opposed to knowingly hire people. The penalties for not using E-Verify altogether, even though you knew or should have known to use it, doesn't actually, result in any real penalties. It's nuts.
Let's talk about some other. Is there anything else you wanted to add about immigration before we move on to some of the other?
My frustrations have been, I've been pretty clear about them since the day I got here, because ever since I got here, I keep seeing. It's okay to say something in a press conference, but when we reduce an idea down to paper that are legal fictions that are not workable. As a former prosecutor, we'll pass things up here, and then my friends from the state attorney's office will text me or call me and be like, "Dude, did you like forget how it works when you're in a courtroom? Why would you add additional elements that are impossible for us to prove beyond a reasonable doubt? Like, you're adding all of these extra things under the guise of being tougher. You're adding extra layers." I give you a perfect example. When you want to create state crimes that include a component that requires federal participation, you need to understand something. If Dara is arrested for something by a local police department, and the entire universe of witnesses and necessary parties are typically all within your control and purview at a state level, which means the state attorney who files a charge against you can subpoena the officer, subpoena lab results and the lab technician, subpoena records, a video, all the evidence that's necessary, witnesses and evidence that's necessary is within the state attorney's purview. When you start adding charges that have an element that require federal participation, an assistant state attorney can't mandatory subpoena a federal ICE agent to state court.
Right.
So when you have an additional element of this person has been convicted of illegal reentry, and we pass a bill that has no consideration for whether or not judges will take judicial notice of a certified conviction of deportation, or is it going to require an ICE agent to be subpoenaed who doesn't have to honor that subpoena from one of the 20 judicial circuits here in state court? You're adding an additional element that will likely never be charged, which then feeds the narrative that some judicial circuit somewhere, probably Miami or Broward, who can't get ICE agents in but has the highest volume of cases, are not going after the illegal aliens. Well, you're leaving out the part where
the governor has the
exactly, and then continues their narrative. Of course,
right?
Yeah. So if we're really serious about it, I have a workable idea as it relates to pretrial detention. The other issue that you have to get by is you can go across the street right now, every day of the week, Monday through Friday, at 11 a.m. in courtroom 2D. I encourage all of your listeners to do it, and go watch a bond hearing here in Leon County for this circuit, which actually has a number of counties in it. And go watch, if there's 100 cases on a Friday morning, how many are closed right there at bond hearing? How many people just take a credit time served and walk out the door? So all the focus is on, you must hold them for trial. Well, that's under the supposition that every defendant's going to say, regardless of their immigration status or condition, they're going to say, yeah, I plead not guilty, and I'll get a lawyer, and we'll set this for trial a week, a year, however long from now, right? Overwhelming majority of these cases, especially on Saturday and Sunday mornings after busy weekends in South Florida, they're closed right there at bond hearing. So there's no provision in there that says the judges. A defendant has the right to plead to the court, an open plea to the court. Judge, I'm pleading to the court. The state won't offer me. The court can offer a plea, and they can't say 1 year in jail for something that's rather de minimis and innocuous. When in normal course and practice, the sentence and the penalty is usually a credit time served or something rather minor. So where's the provision that prevents people from being able to exercise their right to take a plea? So we have to be mindful of that. So a simple idea is if you have an open felony case, let's say in Leon County, and you go down to Miami and you get arrested for something else, the judge will see that you have an open felony case in Leon. You will be held without bond because you have an open felony case. That is, all 20 circuits honor each other. That you have, even in the same circuit, if you have an open case, you're going to be held no bond, not on your new subsequent charge or arrest, but because you have an open felony. That's like a per se danger to the community, and we want to make sure that, in order to be able to exercise practically that same type of dynamic with an unauthorized alien, your state attorneys at bond hearings are going to need software that allows them to immediately identify the immigration status of the defendant right there in front of them. Or the law enforcement officer and agency better be participating in a 287G agreement and have the software. Police officers right now use David or LexisNexis on their laptop to look people up when they pull people over. But if we're going to add the extra element of an unauthorized alien, the program I think is called SAVE that ICE uses. Well, whether it's FHP, FDLE running the program, whether it's a sheriff's department participating in it, when they do the arrest affidavit and deliver someone to the county jail, we need to add a box to the arrest affidavits that actually determine and decide whether or not it's been verified what this person's immigration status is. If it's verified that they are here illegally, then you start having the conversation about being able to hold somebody without bond.
Well, my understanding is there's an issue if you're holding someone under an ICE detainer. If you're holding them longer, like they have to come and get them within 48 hours, I believe, with the 287. There's two portions of the 287G program. One is less intensive training for the deputies, and the other is more intensive.
There's the jail option and then the warrant service option. Yeah.
Right. And then they aren't providing, the federal government wasn't providing the training under the Biden administration to train new deputies.
Yeah, they go to Charleston. To get the certification.
So you heard the same things I heard Sheriff Galtieri say. That's, it's one thing to just sort of do this more ministerial, less. You're not doing the investigation on your own. You're holding them. You've identified them. You're holding them. ICE comes and gets them within 48 hours. That's something relatively easier for them to do.
Yeah, if I get arrested and there's a detainer notice on me, I'm held for at least 48 for the first 48 hours. Presumably the federal government has to come get me to transport me, to one of their facilities to either to hold further or for deportation proceedings, what have you. But my problem was, I'm supposed to be a steward and have a fiduciary obligation to our constituents here in the state. And the problem was back in 2019 when Senator Gruters did SB 168, he wasn't able to articulate which of the 20 judicial circuits, because I've done bond hearings, I did dozens of them, which ones weren't complying with the sort of mandate that we were putting, it was like the first bill I really saw that was about message and not really about substance.
I see.
And so I said, listen, the other issue is the federal government, when they got around to reimbursing us, remember, Trump was president when SB 168 came out. When they were getting around to reimbursing us, it was about $60 per day. Well, in 2019, it was $185 per day to house somebody in a Miami-Dade County jail. So we were fronting and eating and swallowing $125 per person per bed. And so I asked this last week. I said, Senator Gruters, I hope the reimbursement rate is going to be both more prompt, when we get it. The receivables aren't out, 6 months or a year, and then it's more than $60. And he's like, absolutely. So,
But you don't have any way of knowing that.
No. So the bill I'm proposing actually has a cap as to what the state's participation should be on a monetary basis, and that if we have basically receivables that go beyond 90 days, it allows us to basically to withdraw or suspend or terminate a relationship. Because, how much are we supposed to front? How much credit do we extend to the federal government before it's just us paying for to do their own work? So I'm fully on board with federal state agreements, with state and local law enforcement assistance to complement the federal operations. I absolutely am. But two important things, Dara. Many of these agencies that are contemplating participating or already do don't have enough money to pay their officers what they should be paying, even for state and local issues right now and criminal enforcement. Okay, they don't have that right now. So we need to make them whole first before they add on additional responsibility. That's number one. And I don't want us paying more than 20% of the cost of administering and enforcing these agreements. And for that portion that the federal government should be reimbursing us, I don't want us waiting beyond, let's say, 90 days. We don't plumbers and electricians and house painters and your health insurance company and all, nobody, the hospital bills, nobody waits longer than 90 days before it goes into collection. Why are we extending and bending over backwards to use your dollars to pay for? Here's the thing. You know what I hear even from Democrats, Dara? Aren't I paying for these services, which they want, combating illegal immigration? Aren't I paying for this with my federal tax dollars? Am I paying double now that I'm, that I'm also, they're double dipping. The state taxpayer dollars are being used for federal operations that we've already paid for with our taxes. So
I think there might be just a workforce issue too. I mean, there really aren't some of these.
FHP
jails are understaffed.
FHP is still has 150 plus positions vacant. Yesterday in the legislative budget conference, we had to go approve $8.2 million to yet again extend the Florida National Guard.
2 years.
Yeah, it was supposed to be temporary back in 23, and now we are 2.5 years later. And Dara, when you and I were kids, and someone said the National Guard's going to be called in, that wasn't because it was a good thing. And now we're like, we have this weird narrative that the executive pushes, which is like, our National Guard, they're great. God bless the National Guard. We'd be screwed without them, but that's not supposed to be the story of success as a Band-Aid for critical staffing shortages at the Department of Corrections. Why don't we just pay these people more so they actually want to work there?
When you enlist to be in the National Guard, I would imagine that your expectation is not that you are going to be serving in a prison for an extended period of time.
Well,
either.
Not only that, I'm not saying that they're all incredibly glamorous, cinematic-like missions that the National Guard, they have to expect from time to time.
Hard shit.
But here's the thing. The National Guard is invaluable during disasters and recovery and particular missions that have an end date. There's an expiration, and the mission.
These are every 6 months he's renewing these orders.
The mission should last, whatever is reasonable. So. They've participated and helped in invaluable assistance in a number of hurricanes that you and I can both name, but it didn't drag on for 2.5 years. This is no longer a mission. It's not temporary anymore.
Well, the prison system is in crisis. We keep hearing it every committee meeting I go to. I've been hearing this for years now. Let's shift to prisons because that's part of your jam as a legislator. You've been to, I think, all the prisons, right?
Not all. I've not been all.
You've been to a lot of them, and you have a lot of thoughts about how we're managing our prisons. What are we going to do about it, if anything, and what do you think we should do? So
we have now over 70, but at one point 67 kind of correctional institutes that were considered public, about 7 that were private. When I came in here as a freshman, part of the Democratic narrative was, no private prisons, private prisons, private prisons. Meanwhile, if any of these people who spoke with such passion and enthusiasm about how horrible the situation is, I guess they're speaking more to the dynamic of like, if we're having privatization, then there's an incentive to put more people. Mm-hmm. Okay, but just practically speaking, if you haven't visited a prison,
I have.
Okay, have you visited a private prison?
I have not, but I've heard they're better because they're air conditioned. A.
Yes.
And the food is better.
Yes.
B. So
I'm telling you, as a former prosecutor and somebody who's visited a lot of prisons.
Yeah.
If any one of these people had, God forbid, ever gets convicted of something, the same people who have been lambasting again, maybe it's the business model dynamic, that some narrative that's been created from some academics, but the reality is if I'm getting sentenced and have some say of where I'm going, it's not the public, it's one of the privates.
I will say I was in the House the other day, and there was the Ricky Dixon, the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, said that 53% of the correctional officers working in the state prison system, the state-run prisons or state-run prisons, have 2 years experience or less, and that includes the ones who are still in training to get certified.
Correct.
Which was kind of a frightening statistic to me.
So Ricky Dixon took over. Remember Mark Inch when I first came here? Mark
Right.
Inch was secretary, and Secretary Dixon has been with corrections for a while, and took over a real crappy situation. I mean, with we have around 115,000 potential beds, but and lately the inventory of which has become kind of important when you're having a discussion about beds and housing of detainees, even, but. About 95,000 of those beds are actually eligible. 87,000 plus are full. So I think the last number I saw last week was 8,198 beds are actually practically available. And the reason being is the dilapidated condition, physical condition of a lot of these places, number one. And number two, even if we were open and habitable, we can't fill the staff to.
They don't have the staffing. They're not. Yeah, they can't open the dorms because they don't have the staff.
And during the pandemic, we reached critical staffing levels. Senator Brandis and I went to go visit a few facilities during the pandemic. Because we heard loved ones talking about their inmates that were. Basically confined and not allowed to go outside for, a few days at a time to get the couple hours. And so we were obviously receptive to go find out what's going on. And the reality is that there just wasn't an additional staff member to open the door and chaperone people on the outside because it was so critical.
Yeah.
When someone got injured or had a medical event, emergency, they were in good faith transporting them to the hospital, but there's a requirement of how many people have to be in the transport van.
There have to have 2 people, I think, at least.
At least, a driver, then I think passenger, and sometimes 3, let's say, based on the emergent circumstance, to transport them to the hospital, which pulls an already skeletal crew to a dangerous level.
Yeah.
Which basically means everybody has to be kept on lockdown until those staff members return, however long later. So a horrible situation. However, kind of segueing and dovetailing from the immigration conversation, Ricky Dixon, told me the other day that last week that there's about 5,000 inmates right now that we're housing who have illegal alien detainers on them.
I heard you asking about that, and so
Who, by the way, get free education.
What the hell?
Yeah. Well, so there's a balance. If, and this is one of those sort of, I won't say it rises to the level of being disingenuous. It's just wildly inconsistent. Here's what I mean. Whether it's the governor, whether it's leadership, whether it's one of these bill sponsors that are filing their own and criticizing the other or vice versa, everybody out of this, one side of their mouth is saying, as soon as these people are arrested, we need to pack them up, detain them, and deport them out of here. And at the same time, we need to enhance crimes and penalties so we can lock these people up. Which is it? Which is it? And I asked this of Gruters, I asked this of Senator Ngoli before, but which is it? If you arrest somebody today, is the idea that we should be enhancing criminal penalties so we can lock them up for a longer period of time that you and I pay for? Or is the idea that as soon as upon arrest and we identify that they're unauthorized aliens here, that we should deport them as fast as possible? Which is it? And I will tell you there needs to be and this is also something I'm proposing, a consideration and a balance between victims' rights and what the legislature's intent and society wants. And here's what I mean by that. You have particular crimes. If somebody is raped, if a family member of yours is murdered, whatever, you're probably not looking to get them out of the country as soon as possible. There are many types of crimes, especially victim crimes, where victims survive. There is a certain sense of comfort knowing someone is locked up and being able to ascertain where they are at all times. In the same vein, there are countries where I don't want people necessarily dropped off at because I know it'd be very easy for them. Their borders are even more porous than ours and easy to escape. But we need a balance. So if we want to take drug trafficking charges and deport those people, but if we're going to deport it back to a country where we think the border is porous and the drug trade is rampant, maybe we want to keep them here. But those discussions need to be had about what types of crimes do we think we want to deport somebody upon
More
arrest?
More nuanced than just get them out of our prisons and send them wherever they came from.
God forbid your child is raped.
Right.
You as a family need to really be in part of the discussion as, do we want this person out of the country, or do we want them locked up in a jail cell that I can go on the Florida inmate search database and check in every night before I put my head to the pillow to know that my daughter, who is a victim, to know that her assailant is still locked up and where he is in prison.
That's a really good point.
But it's a conversation that actually needs to happen before these people just make these blanket statements and beat their chest about, let's get him out of here, let's lock him up. Well, which is it? We're supposed to deliberate. We're not supposed to get bills 10 minutes before we take the floor. We should have these discussions. And the problem is that I've seen in this space, as it relates to criminal law, there's only like 3 of us who have ever really been in a courtroom and went through a trial in the legislature. 3 or 4 people, maybe. Meanwhile, these things are written by people, that are playing checkers and not chess.
Let's talk about condos. That's been another issue the governor called for you guys to address. You have addressed it over the past few years, and you've held a number of town halls around the state. You have a lot. I don't know how many condos do you have in condo associations do you have in your district? I'm guessing quite a few.
The largest number of any of the 40 senators.
Okay. And you and Senator Bradley, who was the sponsor of the bill, have been working very closely on this issue. My impression watching you at the workshop a couple weeks ago is that you're trying to dispel some of the narrative that's out there about, or some of the that people are maybe misinterpreting the bill, that the changes. We know they have to do these inspections now. There has to be money put in reserves. This was born of the horrific collapse of the
Champlain Towers and Surfside.
I was going to say,
24th.
I wanted to make sure I had the right name. Right. So tell me what's the reality, and what's the kind of uphill battle that you're facing trying to get like people confused with the facts?
So we were, I don't want to say that we were shocked or surprised, but you should be able to rely and anticipate that when you file a piece of legislation, and a necessary component of legislation, especially when it involves an appropriation and money, whatever, but that the attendant state agency or organization or stakeholder partners that would be involved in the implementation and application of a piece of legislation are adequately equipped or competent to proceed to assist. Meaning, I can go ahead and come up with a really good idea on a piece of paper and get my colleagues in both houses to agree, and the governor can sign it and hand out a blue Sharpie to everybody that was there at the signing. But if the bill calls for an agency to go ahead and implement something, or to staff it, or to provide technology or software or space for it, and they're not adequately equipped to do it, or not well versed enough on the subject matter, then it's a problem. And condos have been a perfect example of this over a number of years, where we've ballooned up now to 1.6 million or so condo individual units, 25,000 plus associations. And for a long time, in fairness to DBPR, there are so many things to so many people. They license nail technicians and building officials, but also condos. And so there just are not enough people for enforcement, for interpretation. We'll file a bill, it'll be signed into law, and it takes months before there's even a one-pager up on a website to describe what it is that we're doing. We file bills that pass here in Tallahassee all the time, Dara, even on some of the socially divisive issues, by way of example, that calls for some department, like let's say Department of Education, to promulgate and define what a certain term means. A year passes, one of my colleagues goes to expand the prior year's bill to include even more scope and latitude, and yet the terms aren't even defined again yet a year later. So that's a great frustration. So what Senator Bradley and I have done is, I think we've done 25 collectively, and she's done some on her own. I've done a bunch on my own. We've been with 15 or 16,000 people in attendance in excess. I mean, we've gone to Port St. Lucie, Orlando, Aventura, Surfside, Hallandale, Hollywood. I went to Puerto Rico to talk about condo building structures. So Here's the bottom line. Reserve requirements have already been in statute for years, with the proviso that you can waive with enough people to be able to waive that requirement. I'm the only one of 40 that lives in a condo in the Senate.
Oh, really?
Some of our members have condos as second or third homes, but
Right.
I'm the only one whose family lives in a condo.
Right.
Right? I filed parts of this bill 7 years ago now we're going on, and then again 6 years ago. And when you say that this is all born out of Surfside, the catalyst to actually start talking about it was Surfside. But and Senator Pasadomo, to her credit, then Senator Pasadomo voted for my condo bill back in the day. It just didn't move along.
Okay.
On transparency
I
and
stand
accountability.
corrected.
So here's where we are. There's two major components. Structural integrity reserve studies. It takes a look at a snapshot of where your building is and the structural components within your building and how much useful life is left on those enumerated components, which are subsection G in the bill in the statute. The other one is a milestone inspection, which basically says, where are you right now, in addition to like the snapshot that's an integrity reserve study, but where are you right now to identify any immediate or emergent needs of things that have to be repaired, okay? Really collectively no different than a home inspection, which nobody seems to balk at, and banks require, obviously, and even if you're not getting a lender, you still get a home inspection. But when the home inspection came back on a condo and said, these appliances have this much useful life, these repairs or replacements need to be made, this is the physical condition of within the four corners, within the four walls of the condo, people got home inspections all the time. They're required. No one ever did a home inspection of the building where their home is sitting in.
Right.
Ever. And
that's just amazing.
Conceptually, 39 of my colleagues are very familiar with home inspections, familiar that the entirety of the property that they're buying and living in, selling, buying, or lending, getting a loan on, it has the entirety of the property in it. If I'm in a 100-unit building and I'm buying one condo, I'm getting an inspection on 1% of the building. Some inspections go to the chiller and the HVAC system, get a little more extensive, but they're not looking at the columns actually holding up my unit.
Right.
They're not looking at the waterproofing and vapor barriers and subsurface
Some of those
conditions.
pictures we saw at that meeting,
yeah,
the inspections are showing,
right,
were pretty frightening.
You have home inspectors come with a cool wrapped little SUV. They go up the elevator with a clipboard. They go inside. They take a look at your microwave, your dishwasher, the lights, the circuit breaker on the wall. They take a bunch of pictures, upload it to a template, and send it to charge you $1,000 and send it to you for your home inspection. They're satisfied. They're not looking at what's holding the building up. And so even the governor conceded in Miami Lakes at a round table and down in Pinellas at the second round table that, listen, he thinks it's reasonable and rational that you go ahead and you get a snapshot of the health of your building and where you are. But it's a classic go slow, hurry up. It's nothing was done for 30 years, and here we are. The 39 of my colleagues there are all, I have to be in good faith. I can't be disingenuous. I have to appreciate that my 39 colleagues are 100% responsible for their roof. They're 100% responsible for their windows and their doors and any of these other structural components of their house should an act of God or war or something happen, to their home. They have to put away their rainy day fund. They have to dip into savings that they may have had allocated and started saving for something completely different in their life. But now they got to dip into it because there was an unexpected event and their deductible doesn't cover what it is.
Right.
So legislators, I think part of our job is to create some individual or group of people within our districts that are sympathetic victims in order to appeal to, the better selves of our colleagues to try to extract money or assistance, rather immediately.
Right.
But I have an entire concentration of the majority of my condo associations have been doing this anyway and employing best practices and don't need mommy and daddy in Tallahassee to tell them how to run their building. Okay. But a lot of them went 30, 40 years without saving a dime. They have 100% equity in their units. So when the media talks about the condo crisis and they use this proverbial octogenarian for every example who's on a fixed income, I've yet to meet the octogenarian. The largest cost driver, to be clear, leading up to this creation of now the condo crisis has been insurance, not Senator Jen Bradley and Representative Lopez's bill.
Right.
Because Most of these associations aren't collecting these reserves until January of 2026 as required by our law. It's been insurance. It's insurance that has tripled or quadrupled in the last 3 years. That's the cost driver.
Okay, I'm going to push back a little because I heard the things about the media's creating this crisis. I
didn't say creating, but definitely fostering.
Okay, so fanning the flames, I guess. But I have seen videos of some of these condo meetings down in Miami-Dade, I think in Representative Lopez's district, where the people are going crazy because they're getting these assessments and they say they can't afford to pay them. Now you're saying you have 100% equity in there. I guess the implication is if you can't afford the assessment, then you can sell.
Well,
people might not want to sell.
So a condo.
And where are you going to go?
Well, so to be clear, you have to draw the I guess by way of example or analogy in your head. It's like, how much does a car cost? What would your next question be? What kind of car are we talking about?
Right.
What's the use? Where is it?
Right.
Okay.
So of course there's a continuum of.
Right. So when we say condo, I have a rather equal number of complaints that come into our office as they have been even before Surfside and after Surfside. The overwhelming number of which are about transparency with their association. I have yet to hear from a single constituent. 66% of my 600,000 constituents live in condos.
Wow.
Okay? I've yet to hear a single constituent say, Senator Pizzo, I don't think we should have to pay this. It's never we shouldn't have to come up with reserves, make a special assessment payment. It's never that. You know what it is? We just want transparency. We just want access to records. No different than the problem was before. We just want to see how you arrived at this number. And Senator Bradley and I had the last condo summit to bring in professionals who are working on creating these budgets, milestones, and structural integrity to be like, guys, stop the price gouging.
They're putting in extra stuff that is like
Senator Bradley and
not required by the law.
Senator Bradley and I went to a condo meeting without much announcement, who had a pending $56 million assessment. An hour later, they chopped $25 million off of the pending assessment.
It wasn't mandated, things that were not mandated by the law.
Clearly outside the scope. And the property managers who sometimes are abusing this little window, this Goldilocks period for them, are saying this is probably the only time we'll be able to do an assessment, so we might as well collect for whatever we can collect for now. But when we're seeing things like pool furniture and basketball courts, that's not structural.
Right.
Not necessary at all. So that's the bigger issue, is about now rolling out the law. Now, if DBPR was adequately staffed and equipped to be able to serve this large volume of buildings and associations and their questions, on a ratio basis, there's more people answering the anonymous hotline from the Florida bar for lawyers who have questions about ethics than there are about, people available to answer the phone, to answer a question. And the other frustration, Dara, is I've had DBPR representatives and agents at meetings watching laws being violated in real time, and they can continue to say they don't have the power to stop the meeting and stop the action. I've been physically present over the last couple months, and to be able to give them the teeth. So I think the condo division. Last year I filed a bill that it should go under the purview of the Attorney General's office. Ashley Moody actually told me on speakerphone, "Yeah, I'll take it. Okay, I'll take it," and then changed her mind. But I think condos need to be under a commission like the PSC or something like the Florida Gaming Commission kind of idea.
Do you think that's something that the legislature would do?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Huh. That's interesting.
You can't license, no offense, and I'm not discounting but you can't be licensing nail salons and
barbers. I knew you were going to go barbers.
No knock or criticism to that, but if you want to be a service industry oriented agency, that's fine for licensure and compliance and continuing education. But you also can't be licensing building engineers for high rises and building officials for those cities where they are, and property managers at the same time when we're talking about complex budgets.
Let's shift a little bit to politics. I know I
hate politics.
Getting to the end here, but there's a lot of political ambitions in the Senate right now. You're the head of the Democratic caucus. Hillsborough County just turned red. The Republicans are cleaning the clock of Democrats in voter registration. What are the Dems doing statewide, and what's their messaging? And then I want to ask you about like what's in your future. We hear a lot about you and what you might be running for and other political chess. But first, let's start with what are the Democrats doing to, turn the tide?
Yeah. So
I guess turn the tide.
I want to qualify that. For me right now, the Florida Democratic Party are the 12 people in this caucus right now. That's our universe. Are the 12 people in this caucus? For me,
so you're just focused on
there's a limited
the Florida Senate.
There is a limited
and what you
capacity and availability, and we are in a super minority as it is. And so, as I have spoken with my caucus members as a group and individually over the last couple weeks, we are it. We are the buck stops with us.
Okay, so like Hillsborough County turning red, like not my job.
Yeah, listen. If I'm out there, if I wasn't in this process, if I wasn't as engaged as I am or have to be or should be, I would be wildly underwhelmed with the official structure of a party apparatus. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Okay. There's no money. There's no momentum. There's no message. Dara, I'm the largest individual donor to state House and Senate races over the last 2 cycles. Mm-hmm. So I'm not saying this as like just having an opinion. Like go look at my PAC records of where the money went. Mm-hmm. So I've invested. I've tried to backstop the gaping holes that there have been, but. There's some tranches. There's the Florida Democratic Party, I guess, sort of officially. There's the House Democrats and there's the Senate Democrats. And I have tremendous respect for Minority Leader Fentress Driscoll. She's super smart. She's super capable. There's our caucus, and then I guess there's like the sort of party. There's a Florida Democratic Party, whatever, and we don't really talk. We're not strategizing. We're not, I get called for a check every once in a while from different people and candidates and causes, but this is it. And you know what? This caucus, Dara, objectively is probably a lot less progressive and more practical, I think, than a lot of the people that are really loud on Twitter maybe want us to be. Well,
you and I were talking maybe it's a lot of the. I'm trying to find a way to ask the question. I guess the question is like, do you think, writ large, Democrats need to shift more towards the center, particularly on some of the culture?
Dara, if quote unquote the center means
I don't even know.
Yeah, well,
I mean, it's just words I'm using, but I don't know.
See, here's the thing. I don't know either, and we. I'm frankly I'm done caring about labels.
Okay.
I'm done. I think I've been done for a while.
Fair enough.
Okay. I at a granular level, at a really simple, basic level, Dara, I don't care what you call it because I've seen colleagues on the other side of the aisle have to call things what they really aren't, whether by projection or the illusory truth effect, whatever. So here's where we are. Here's where we are as a group, the 12 of us. Okay, we are just doing what's important to and focusing on what's important to families. And the first, or the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the top 5 priorities for a Florida family, and what's rather universally important. Okay, so pick somebody from across the aisle that you see not getting along with one of my members, okay? Where there's animosity or adversity and they go after each other. You know what? They both love their kids. They both want their kids to get a good education. They both would like to live in a safe neighborhood. They would both like to not have anxiety before they go to sleep at night about how much their insurance premium might spike or property taxes, some storm, and if there is, can we survive it? And should I keep investing in my community, my home, because the infrastructure investment is there from my local and state elected officials? Those 5 things. Everything else, every other discussion about some issue, not item, not infrastructure, not expense on a family budget. Everything else is less important. It's just less important. My top 5 things, and I do this from time to time to make sure that my mother said, make sure you always know the price of bread and milk and eggs if you're going to run for office, and don't be so out of touch. But my top 5 priorities align with the top 5 priorities of my caucus members and the Republican caucus members and probably the Republican caucus members in California and Texas and New York. And everything else is less important to me as a father and what my obligation is as a representative. It's less important. And I know it's not sexy. I could get a lot more clicks and a lot more likes and a lot more followers if I took a very loud position about a social issue. But what's most important to my district is that when they flush their toilets, that the sanitary sewer lines actually transmit waste to the facility. That when they turn their faucet on, that it's potable drinking water and it's clean. That there isn't shooting in their streets, that the street lights work. That's more important, that kids can go outside on their bicycle and walk the streets and not worry about getting abducted or killed or robbed or whatever. That the Jewish kids in my community don't get assailed and harassed by people that drive down here to target them and threaten their way of life and their safety and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Being able to peacefully be able to practice your religion and your faith and live well with your family and have good food to eat, and those are really important things. Everything else is bullshit. And you know why it's bullshit? It's because it's been used by my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, not even organically at their direction, but because they were told to, of a little playbook collection of socially divisive issues. What the hell? AP African American History, CRT, woke, which I still can't define, all of that stuff. Meanwhile, in the background, almost like the national debt clock in Times Square that just keeps on ticking, are insurance rates, funding for law enforcement went down. It's all of these narratives that are just a loud distraction from actually doing the real work. So when you say, are we more centrist? Are we coming to center? I think at this point in time, and this point in where we are in the United States and where we are in Florida, Dara, I think we need not be concerned with labels, because I'm blessed to have a caucus I don't think that wants to, necessarily get credit for it on behalf of the Democratic Party. We just want to actually do our job. We will not shy away from credit or congratulations and acclaim and whatever. But we're not doing it as a representative of one particular party. We're doing it as a representative of our constituency, half of mine of which are not Democrats. I don't, Darrow, and maybe it's because I've had some real tragic circumstances in my district and my representation. I don't give a shit what the political persuasion or partisanship was of the 98 people that died in my district at Surfside. I never asked someone's political party affiliation when we helped tens of thousands of families get their unemployment in my district. And you know why? Because when I grew up, the nicest people to me in my neighborhood as a kid, when we had a real viability, when we had a real fabric of a community growing up as a kid, I don't know the political parties and persuasions of any of my neighbors growing up, because they would all feed me, they'd all take care of me, and we could go to their house in an emergency in the middle of the night if one of the other families were suffering. And once we get closer and get back to that and actually be real people who look each other in the eye, when men become men again, and not little tweeters, but actually become men who can win both an intellectual argument based on the merit of the argument, but can also go outside in the playground, in the plaza, and beat the shit out of each other if need be to get it out of our systems instead of doing it on social media like little kids do, we'll be in a better place. So is that centrist? No, I think it's human. I think it's normal. I think we all need to get back to normalcy.
Well, that was that sounded like a great segue into my next question, which is, there's a lot of chatter about you possibly running for governor in 2026, and that sounded kind of like a campaign speech. It wasn't speechy at all, and it wasn't campaigny at all. Obviously, you're very passionate about the work that you do, about representing your constituents, and about the way, and I've listened to you, and about the way that we function as in our country and as a society. So I'm not disparaging what you just said. I agree with everything you said. Like, we need to take better care of each other, and we want to have a safe place to live. And, Waffle House just announced the other day that they're adding a 50-cent surcharge on every egg order. So that's where we're at. People are struggling, and I don't know what my car insurance keeps going up 30% every year. That pisses me off.
And more importantly, most of my constituents that I'm blessed to have, listen, they don't care who might be responsible for gas prices and egg prices
right.
and the prior this administration, and they don't just fix it.
Right.
Fix it.
Enough with the finger pointing.
Fix it.
Right. Right. Okay. So you're very pragmatic, and I appreciate that about you. And so, are there what is in your future? What are you going to be doing in 2 years?
I would, if I told you I'm planning on something, it's you can't plan.
So you're not going to make any news on Deeper Dive this weekend by saying, yes, I'm in it to win it.
Oh, I think right now I'm the most viable potential candidate for the Democrats to get NPAs and some Republicans to dip their toe into an alternative, leadership. Yeah.
For governor or AG?
I don't know. I'd like to. So I turned 49 in May. At 50, you can go to qualifying school for the Senior PGA Tour, the Champions Tour.
Oh my!
So
that's so funny because on one of my questions is, what is on your bucket list?
Yeah. So
is that on your bucket list, the PGA Tour?
Well, it would be in and around the same time that I'd have to be in full swing. So I'm going to be in full swing, literally or figuratively, for on a gubernatorial race or the Senior PGA Tour. No, here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Okay.
If there's somebody else who objectively can do a better job, who would be more viable, who is just rather impervious, as I consider myself to be, and I don't think even my worst detractors can't say this. I'm not beholden to a special interest. I can't be bribed or bought or persuaded or influenced into something that is not in my heart and does not make sense. That the data doesn't dictate, it makes sense. That's it, and it's very few, and it's not a knock or a discount. Like I don't think this is an exclusive club, that should restrict people who don't otherwise have the means to be here. It's just, I'm just going to continue to speak the truth. Now, it's served me pretty well up until this point. I think, and I don't see it changing, to my detriment of just being really, really, really honest and candid. But maybe that's not what people want. Maybe that's not going to resonate. I don't know. It's just I just continue to be frustrated, and telling the truth just clears my conscience. But also, I think it is really effective. Even last week, I'm watching some of my colleagues on news programs and saying things, and then I'm texting them almost in real time to be like, they'll make a comment about Democrats. I go, you're so full of shit, and they're like, ha ha, LOL. Like they don't actually mean what they say, and they're
right.
Yeah. And I like, for instance, Jay Collins. All right, I like Jay Collins. He's just incredible service and sacrifice to our country.
Yes.
He's a good dude. My son Jack is going to be reporting to Parris Island, the Marine Corps, in 3 weeks.
Wow.
I'm going to have him up here next week. And Jay's like, I really want to sit down with your son and talk to him about MARSAC and all that stuff. But he's on Dana Loesch, and he's like, the Democrats are salivating right now with this infighting. I text Jay, I go, I don't salivate, Jay. And he's like, LOL.
Right.
Hold on a second. Don't group me and my caucus into the loudest, wackiest far left comments, and I won't group you into the wackiest far right comments.
Okay, fair.
So when you ask me about what the party's doing, what the Democrats are doing,
I hear you.
It's enough of a responsibility right now to work within the confines of this apparatus, and myself and my 11 caucus members and I want to be held and judged on our performance. And right now we don't want to be labeled with, attached to, or responsible for whatever someone wacky says, because they are not agents and representatives of the mission and the work that's done here in the caucus.
Well, I applaud you for that.
Yeah.
So my last question is, what are you looking forward to the most? The regular legislative session starts March 4th in about another 4 weeks. What are you looking forward to the most in this 2025 session?
Just being able to continue to work together. And I say continue, and you're like, oh, wow, that sounds very adversarial up there. How does anything get done? 80+% of the bills that pass in session, as you know, Dara, maybe the public doesn't know, those bills are passed unanimously. That both sides agree on. It speaks to the 4 or 5 most important things to everyone's family universally. So the overwhelming majority of bills that we have here, they pass almost unanimously, unless someone's just trying to be, rogue for the sake of it. The one no vote on something. But for me, really, it's the same thing it was the first year I was here. It was infrastructure. There are 2 types of minds: those that try to get as much as they possibly can done within their term limit and their time here that serves them, and maybe has a more immediate kind of Band-Aid benefit. And I call those the bonuses, right? When DeSantis is handing out $1,000 bonuses and now $5,000 bonuses, that's so corny and cheesy. I'm not saying that the recipients don't deserve it, but they deserve a lot more. I think they deserve much more. But like when you're giving a bonus, a one-time bonus to somebody that you want them to have a career in something,
transactional.
It's so transactional.
Yeah.
Give them a higher starting salary, so their earnings over the years are more, so their retirement is vested at a higher amount. So you have those types of politicians, and you have the ones that's like, they actually care about the next generation. So things that are really important to me, like infrastructure and resiliency, and I hate labels and terms, but like the poop needs to be, transmitted correctly. The roads need to be reinforced.
Yeah.
We need to fund law enforcement and systems and stop putting Band-Aids, set up a structure where people want to work for the state of Florida in positions and not have to call the National Guard in to staff, right, as an emergency staff. So the long-term kind of things that are not sexy, that are tough love, that maybe are a little expensive and not great to campaign on. And that's what I'll push for, in this Goldilocks period that I have as minority leader.
Senate Minority Leader Jason Pizzo, thank you again for allowing me to come and visit you in your office. It's been a real treat.
Everyone should come visit. Thank you so much for coming. Come back.
Thanks for listening to Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by the News Service of Florida. Hosted by News Service senior writer Dara Cam and produced by me, Mike Exline. Music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC.